This is Tirana's AcreForward, the ag industry's most thought-provoking podcast. Listen to interesting people as we go in-depth into the issues affecting crop advisors, growers, and farm communities, uncovering the truth about the ag business and using technology to prepare for the unforeseeable. Ready to explore the future? Let's dig in.
I'm here today with Steve Patterson. I've had the pleasure of working with Steve in my career prior to Tiranas, and now with Tiranas. Steve, you've been doing some things with us and with our customers. Really appreciate you joining. Want to say good morning to you and welcome. Every day is a great day here at Tiranas. I know you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
Coming from Southern States. How are you today, Steve?
I'm doing great. How about you, Mike?
Everything's really going well. Really enjoy, I think, the start of the season. It's been too dry in some areas. Now we're getting some moisture. Things are looking good, but season's looking good. Customers seem to be doing really, really well with their customers. But as with everything, every week changes here and you got to stay on top of things.
Sure. Yeah.
So Steve, you were 39 years with Southern States Cooperative. Tell us a little bit about your time there and what Southern States is, and let's just get to know what that means, because you did a lot of things at Southern States. But first, 39 years at Southern States, congratulations. I think they just turned 100. I see that in the Crop Life magazine. I have my edition. I do want your signature. But Southern States Cooperative, tell us a little bit about it, how you got started and what they do.
Well, Southern States is 100 years old this year. And, quite frankly, I was blessed to hire on with Southern States back in the day, straight out of the University of Kentucky. And I started in Western Kentucky and worked in Roanoke, Virginia, Raleigh, North Carolina, and then spent the past 28 years in Richmond and the corporate level and executive level. But Southern States started as a group of farmers in, Richmond, Virginia, looking for a better way. Now, you think about that. Farmers are always looking for a better way. And they couldn't get the seeds that worked in the Mid-Atlantic area, so they pulled $11,000 together from 150 different farmers. And that gave birth to the Virginia Seed Service, which became Southern States a few years later. They added fertilizer, they added fuel, they added feed, and then added farm supplies as well. So over the years, Southern States, grew and grew, and it became about a $2 billion organization. And then the world changed a little bit. And Southern States realized, we need to change as well and get back to what we really do well and focus on the farmer, focus on the members. And they're in a really good spot right now. So it was a great run. To tell you the truth, Mike, some of the most exciting parts of it were when we launched precision agriculture. And that's been a while back now.
Right.
But it makes me think about what you're doing with Tiranas, because at that point in time, if you think about it, when a farmer spread fertilizer, he put out the same amount per acre, because that's all he could do, really. 300 pounds of this or 400 pounds, 1 ton of lime per acre, whatever. And when precision ag came along, it fundamentally changed all that. And quite frankly, we had a blast during that time period, because people were grabbing it and running with it, not knowing all the answers. We didn't know all the answers, but we just kept driving it and running with it. And it ended up being a huge benefit to our growers and our members and the company, quite frankly. So I could go on, but I won't bore you to death with that.
No, absolutely. I think when you talk about precision ag, even what's underneath that umbrella, it starts out with innovation and things that are foreign to the way we operate in agriculture, and then it becomes a mainstay. So even what's in precision ag in the 80s, 90s, the aughts, 2000, the teens, and now has shifted quite a bit. I mean, you've seen biotech come in, you've seen chemical and crop protection advances, fertilizer advances, and I mean, you're a crop advisor, professional agronomist, you've been a nutrient management consultant, a pesticide consultant, IPM, you served as a board member for ARA, right? The Retail Association. You've done government affairs. So you've had a pretty broad view, both technically, but also from a business standpoint of what it means to operate in agriculture and seeing that change. And so with that breadth and all these roles that you've had, what are your takeaways before we talk about the differences in the Midwest, which a lot of our audience is going to come from places in the Midwest like Indiana, Iowa, Nebraska, and other areas. And I do want to get to that. When you think about all the functions, industry relations, heck, farm supply, running full-on retail stores beyond ag retail, but normal, like Rural King type, Tractor Supply type stores, you've seen a lot of changes. What was your favorite part about the job for 39 years? What was the best part about the job, most rewarding thing that you experienced?
I think the most rewarding thing was, working with all the fellow employees at Southern States, many of whom have been there for years and years, and they truly live the brand of, helping farmers grow things, care for animals, delivering hassle-free warmth to our customers in the energy side. I mean, the employees care, and when the employees care, you can do big things. And then, like you said, Mike, under that when I was VP of marketing, under that marketing umbrella came corporate communications, government relations. It came merchandising, managed the sales force for a long time. We had 100 agronomy sales managers at one point, 32 feed sales and technical representatives, 22 dealer sales managers. And it was always about, it was always about winning, and having a team of people that were excited and creating an atmosphere for success. And you always have a lot of challenges in business. You always have a lot of issues. But when everybody's giving it all they got and trying hard, it's fun. And so I enjoyed all that. I particularly enjoyed in my career the launching of precision ag, the launching of the biotech. That biotech wave came right after precision ag. And so, but one other thing I want to mention was, before I get to the government part, was years ago, Mike, I took all those certifications and I wanted to become a certified professional agronomist, a certified crop advisor, a certified crop scientist. That's not on there, but I became a geeky crop scientist as well, a nutrient management specialist. If you've ever taken the nutrient management exam in Maryland and Delaware, it's extremely difficult, and a pesticide consultant. But Mike, this is a leadership lesson. I had a guy ask me one day, he said, "Why do you take all those certifications?" And I said, "Well, I just want to really be good at what I do." And I grew up in a household where, employment was sometimes a struggle. And the guy told me, he goes, "Well, just so you know," he goes, "those certifications are great, but the way you really grow and win is when you take a group of people from point A to point B and you can lead people." And that was one of those teachable moments for me, because I was so focused on the technical side of agronomy that I wasn't as focused on the people side of becoming a leader. And that was a lessons learned for me. And so then on, I became a student of leadership as well. And how do you motivate people, influence, inspire people? And so then I'll mention government relations, because, next thing you know, we were going to Washington and sitting down with senators and Congress folks from both parties. And both parties listen when it comes to agriculture, because many of them don't know anything about it, unless you're from the Midwest or from the I-states. And they both listened intently because they wanted to learn. And we would talk about the farm bills. We talked about GMOs. We talked about waters of the United States and several other things. There's always issues to talk about up there. So I really enjoyed that, because you're dealing with, the people that make the laws in the country. And it was an honor to do that, quite frankly. It really was. I enjoyed that very much. So I'll stop talking about all those things. But
no, I think it's great. We're going to come back to that. I always see about people when they look at this. So first, you did do a book, Steve Patterson, Street Smarts for Success. So you're also an author. That's a guide. And I think that lesson you have about focusing on how we move people and lead people and work with each other is really key. I want to be mindful, because there's so many different ways we could have a conversation. I think if if it's a retailer or cooperative in the Midwest, here I've got somebody from the East Coast, Virginia and Carolinas, but there's also Kentucky, which is in the mix. It's sometimes the Midwest, sometimes it's the South. Right. And so I think where I'd like to go is, what's the difference, right? So you've been partnering with Taranis a bit to help us understand the customer, the market, the voice of the customer. We'll get into that a little bit later. But what's it like to be from the American South, serving in the South? We can talk about the crops and the mix for those who don't know it. And then to go travel through all the I-states, Nebraska, all the different places, Dakotas. What stands out to you? Like, what impresses you? What's different? Let's talk a little bit about what you're seeing just in that, going from Virginia to the Midwest and the Plains. What sticks out in your mind?
Well, it's a couple things. Number one, the acreage is amazing. So you can imagine the largest acres in our territory were Western Kentucky and the coastal plain of Virginia's and the Carolinas and the eastern shore of Maryland, Delaware. But when you get out in Nebraska and some of those states out there, and as far as you can see of soybeans and corn, it's different. It's big. But at the same time, as I talk to a lot of the retailers, there's not a whole lot of differences. And that is, they're there to take care of their farmers. They're there to take care of their members. They want to know how they can help them. They're busy, very busy. The ag retailer wears a lot of hats. And so it was easy to engage in conversation with everybody because everybody breathes agronomy. You have to in that part of the world. And then, most people know that the farmer's biggest concern is increasing their profitability. There's other concerns, what I do with my farm after I'm gone. Well, my children inherit it. Regulatory, government, taxes, all these things. But at the end of the day, their biggest concern, validated by a lot of research, is their profitability. Much like the ag retailer is. Without a fair profit, you go away. So it was easy to engage with a lot of the people there. So there were some commonalities, no question. The biggest difference was the acreage is just so much larger out in the Midwest than it is on the East Coast.
And the diversity of crops primarily being corn and soy versus sometimes when you move to the East Coast, you start seeing other crops, different rotation, different timing, different considerations.
I'm glad you brought that up. The East Coast, you have cotton, corn, tobacco, soybeans, wheat. You have alfalfa, you have dairies, you have a huge amount of cow-calf operations. The cow-calf operator was, the primary customer, one of our primary customers. And the biggest crop, believe it or not, was pasture. Cool season grasses, the fescues, the orchard grasses. Then you get farther south, it's more Bermuda grasses and
sure.
And all those. But no, I'm glad you brought that up because obviously the cropping's different and the type of agriculture is different. But the farmer's mindset is pretty similar, which is I'm doing this to try to make a living. Now there are small farmettes, if you would, on the East Coast, and they may have 10 acres here, 30 acres there. They may have a few cattle, and they may work at the post office. There's a lot of those type customers on the East Coast as well. So that's a good point.
Yeah, it's amazing. And even within the Midwest and Plains, and we're generalizing, you go county by county, state by state, there's a lot of diversity that from the outside looking in, it's corn and beans. But you start getting into how it's raised, what they do, the soils, there's a lot of complexity, right? So you've seen biotech, precision ag, you talk about profitability. Let's just kind of dig back and think of grower profitability, retail profitability. Over your career, what are the breakthroughs that have addressed that? And what are the things that have made that harder?
To me, the breakthroughs that address that more than anything is the ability of the staff at retail to add value.
Okay.
So you go to a retailer where and in a way, Mike, it goes back to mindsets I mentioned earlier. You go into a retailer who's got a mindset of winning. and they walk in the room with the swagger, and they're confident in themselves. They're confident in the ability to bring value to their growers, to articulate the benefits of what they bring, to charge a fair margin for the value they add. You have to be able to do that. If not, you're a commodity. So if you're adding value, you have to be able to charge a margin for that value. And the good ones know how to do that. They have, and their salespeople are of the trusted advisors. You know, they're the ones, when the farmers see them coming, they're glad. You know, there's an old quote, there's two types of salespeople. One is the farmer sees them coming and there's a sense of impending doom because they don't bring any value. And then there's the one, when they see the trusted advisor type coming, they're glad because they always bring them something of value. And that's what you want to build. But that type of retailer, they'll win all day long. But if you have a negative mindset and I've got all this competition, I can't make a margin, you know, my sales guy doesn't want to sell value. He just wants the lowest price of Roundup or whatever. That mindset doesn't work well. So it really, Mike, you've said it before, it's back to people. People make the biggest difference, without a doubt.
I think it's really interesting because I asked, you know, of all the breakthroughs, of all the things, how do you affect profitability? And you didn't bring up, well, with this GMO trait or this platform or this technology, it enables this efficiency, that efficiency. You went right to the behavioral elements and the elements of knowing the grower at retail. And I think for the audience listening, I mean, this is probably the only podcast, the only medium directed squarely at American ag retail and cooperatives, right? So I find, I don't know that we talk enough about this topic, Steve. So let's go a little bit deeper, because about that winning mindset. So what is a winner as an ag retailer? You've done this for a long time. You've seen a lot of operators, salespeople, agronomists, crop consultant, whatever we want to say the title is. The reality is you just got to get it done, but you have to do it where you're winning. The farmer feels like you're winning. What does it mean to win and have a winning attitude? What does a winner in retailer in a cooperative look like?
It's a great question, Mike. And years ago, one of my cohorts said, you'll get to a point where you can walk into a retail store and you can just practically smell whether they're a winner or not, because you can feel it. And I think one of the biggest things is that manager or the owner of an independent retail outlet, whoever it is, or the manager of a member co-op, a general manager. One of the main things they have to do as a leader is they have to have the ability to communicate with their employees, set expectations, and inspect what they expect. And by the way, I've used that quote several times in the Midwest, and the first thing a lot of people did was grab their pen and write it down. And I thought that was interesting because at least 5 times people said, oh, I love that. So as a leader, setting expectations doesn't mean be mean. It means this is what we need to do.
Right.
So you set that expectation, and then Mike calls Steve later in the week and says, Steve, we agreed to call on 3 growers. You're going to call on 3 growers this week. How is that going, and how can I help you? It's not beating them up. It's leading them. And the winning retail locations, they know how to do that. And they know how to influence, and they know how to inspire their troops. And, you know, a lot of that comes from regular communication, regular team meetings they have, all those things put together, excitement, enthusiasm, right, energy, all those things roll into that, to that winning team. It's sort of like a sports team. You know, you see a sport team walking out on a basketball court or a football field hanging their head, they're probably going to lose. But when you see them walk out and you know they're fired up, they're ready to go, they've mastered the basics,
right,
you know, the fundamentals, and they know it. So all those things together, and you know, Mike, you say it a lot, but the caring for their customers, they love their customers. They want to serve their customers, and the customers know that. So they build incredible loyalty. So there's all those things that make the biggest difference. We had a grower pass away in Delaware, and he requested to be buried with his Southern States cap on. Now you got to think about that. That's huge. But that's the loyalty that they built at that location. And that guy knew he was an owner of that cooperative. He knew he was an owner, and he just, he was part of that brand.
Right.
And so, I could go on, but that winning team means everything.
I want to dive into how do you build that, right? So if I'm listening to this today, I want to have a winning team, but let's face it, when the season starts, you're running, you're blowing and going. I mean, everything's happening. Usually you're receiving problems, complaints, which are opportunities, right? But, your phone's ringing. Oftentimes it's something that needs to be solved, something that needs to be done. And so it's really tough to plan. And I think the world is, while we work together, while we have to cooperate, while we have to work well together, wouldn't you say farming and serving and farming is getting maybe more complex than what it used to be? Or do you think it's just different challenges? How do you see it changing between the retailer and the grower? What are the differences and what are the ways that you can make a difference?
I think it's extremely complex. I think it's gotten more and more complex. So you think about the advent of precision ag, then the new technology, variable rate planters, the biotech, don't spray fields with this, spray it with that, better keep track of your fields. The overflow of information that comes at farmers, and not just farmers, people, period.
Right.
But the good retailers, they know how to distill down the important stuff and cut through the noise and say, Farmer Joe or Mr. Smith, here's exactly what you need to do. And guess what you just did for that farmer? You saved him time, you saved him money, and he could sleep better at night because he didn't have to worry about all those things. But you gotta earn that. You have to earn that respect from that grower and that trust. But once you have, to me, I used to say the salesman of today has to be a beast. The amount of knowledge they have to know and the ability to discern what's important and what's not. And then distill that down to tell the grower, here's exactly what I recommend you doing and here's why. That to me is a lot of value, but it's not easy to get there. It takes a lot to get there.
So when I think about the value, when you're going to make a recommendation, you have to know what's happening, not just in the field, but with that individual. So you have to start to build that relationship. Today, I think the average member co-op retail consultant is taking on larger farms and more farmers than what they would have 10 years ago. And land's changing hands quickly. You have consolidation. You have 30 years maybe on a farm or 30 years in a role at a location. But one of those sides changes fast. We have to sometimes start over to get to know what works, what doesn't, to get to know each other. So I'm thinking a little bit about the grower and advisor, if we'll use the word advisor for retail and cooperative engagement. What are the fundamentals when you think about engagement and relationships? What's fundamental in building a relationship? And then we can talk about the tools to get there. But what do you think is key about a relationship? And so you're going to have the winning attitude when you have the relationship. What does it mean to have a relationship between anyone, but say a grower and advisor?
I think that's a great point. One of the most important things is, there's an old quote, no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. So do you care? If you care about your customers, you're going to be looking out for them. You're going to drive by their fields. You're going to call them regularly and ask, can you help them in any way? You're going to stay engaged. So you have to care. The other thing is you have to know the type of person you're dealing with. And, this person could be heavy into analytics. Well, that's when you bring your analytics toolbox when you have a conversation with that person. This person is control type. He doesn't want to talk about the ball games and this, that. He wants to know, what can you do for me today? This person is a facilitating personality, and they like to talk about the weather, the government, They like to talk about their crops. They want to drive around, show you every field on their farm. And, and then you have the facilitating personality who, they just want to get along with everybody. But my point there is everybody has a different personality. But the good salesperson understands that and can adjust and bring to each one of those type of personalities and communicate with them the way they want to be communicated with. And that, to me, that's fundamental. If you go to with the wrong box of tools or the wrong set of tools in your toolbox to the wrong type of personality, you're not going to win. So I think that's fundamental as you grow with your customers and you help them. But that goes back to caring too. Do you care enough to do the extra work to bring the analytical information to the analytical farmer who wants to see it? Or do you show up and say, can I help you with anything? It's just different, so, but, and, you can't talk about that without passion. Do you have passion for what you do? Are you excited when you get up in the morning to go make things happen? Or do you brood? If you brood, you're probably in the wrong job or the wrong industry. We don't have time for brooders. You know what I'm saying? So,
not in this business. You got to have a lot of get up and go. And I think some of the things you're talking about are constants that stand the test of time, right? Is you have to care. One philosophy we've had at Taranis, part of what, and maybe we can talk a little bit about what we do here. I always believed and our teams believe, and our customers know this, caring is important. But to care, it's about any relationship. So think about the most important relationships in your life, whether that's metaphysical, whether it's your spouse, whatever we're talking about here. You have to really know someone before you can care or love them, right? And as you know them, you grow in that care, you grow in that affection. And as that starts to happen, you can provide service. So we've been using words like sales and profit. And sometimes those sound bad because we feel pushed in our own lives by salespeople. We feel pushed when it comes to economics, or we feel like it's not a zero-sum game. But when you know something, like advisors know their growers, it creates within the team at that retail location a sense of concern and care and passion for that person, that individual that you break bread with, that you serve on the volunteer fire squad with, that you see at church on Sunday. So I think there's something about intimacy and knowing people and having tools and the ability to create that sense of passion and caring. So then you can provide the service that you've promised. And I just don't think these economic words are bad words, because that's just how we recognize the value. That's how we recognize the work and the fruits of our labor. But Steve, I know you believe this. We talked about it. I think I got a lot of this from you, is you got to know so you can love, so you can serve. In the past, if I went back to 80s and 90s, what are the ways that you would know a grower if you were an advisor? What were the tools that you had to know your customer?
In the 80s and 90s?
Yes, sir.
Back then, generally, it was a lot less than there is now. But, you would go out and see them physically. Okay. You would soil test their fields. You would see them at the coffee shop. You would have grower meetings. You would do those type of things. And while a lot of those are still true, you have so many more tools to bring them and show them, which I think is important. I'll never forget when calling on some customers, the first customer we ever dealt with precision agriculture was Jack Hunt in Western Kentucky near Bowling Green. And he and his son were there, and they were thrilled to death to see it and to use it. And the first thing they said was, this is going to help me because I don't think I'm going to have to spread the same amount of lime on every acre like I used to. Just something that simple. But they saw the value. And but the fundamental, Mike, what you're talking about is humans, and I used to say this in Southern states all the time, humans are emotional first, whether they admit it or not. Humans are emotional. And, love is an emotion.
Yeah.
And it's a very powerful one. And, I used to talk about our equine customers. I said, folks, these people love their horses. They have a passion for their horses. So if you think they're picky about their feed, it's because they are, because they love their animals. And so, but you have to remember that too. And also you mentioned the word sales. If you think about it, selling is really about helping people buy. If you think about that, you're helping people buy more than trying to push something on them that they don't want.
Helping them make a decision that benefits them.
Sure. It's all about, I've often said this, and it takes a lot of years to get to this point, but at the end of the day, the value formula is the same. So if you think about an idea or a product or a service, the value formula is the same. And that is, if I'm talking to you, are the sum total of the benefits, functional, intangible, and the benefits, are they greater than the sum total of the cost in your mind? And it's incumbent upon retailers, marketers, salespeople to get the customer there. Because when I was in marketing for so long, you're always thinking about, why do we buy? Why do people buy? And once you understand that more, then you naturally gravitate to the benefits. The benefits become more clear because you understand that's why people buy in the first place. But you got to be able to know them cold yourself. You got to be able to articulate them smoothly. And then generally it'll sell itself if you're good at that, because the customer will see it. So nobody likes the push sale, like, trying to shove things down your throat. But when you talk about how it can benefit you as a grower, or benefit you as a housewife or a husband or whatever, or if you're on Capitol Hill and you're talking and you're trying to influence people up there, what do you think you're going to talk about? The benefits.
Probably benefits, unless you have pictures that no one else has and you can use those to your benefit.
That's different.
Yeah, that's a different approach. So let's, what I was thinking about is, you've got, say a farmer's got 500 acres, 1,000 acres. In the past, when you would sell seed or you'd scout, they don't even know that you were there. They trust that you say you were there. You'd leave a door, remember the door hangers? You'd leave the doorknob or on the truck, say, I checked out your field, I was here. Because you want to show that you were there, but you want to create the conversation. It's 2023. Because things have changed. In the past, I'd say, Steve, in that back corner, I saw Palmer Amaranth. I think there's an issue there. Your herbicide program does X, Y, Z. Today, the machines tell us what they think they did. Say the planter says, I believe I planted 33,000 plants per acre. And we have those maps. And we know all kinds of things about the machines. But when it comes to what's actually happening on the acre between when that planter leaves and before that combine shows up to harvest, it's a lot of information. It's a lot of data. It's a lot of activity for an advisor and a grower. So now that you've seen what Taranis can do, obviously we record that at leaf level precision throughout the season, so we can both look at with the advisors and growers and know what worked well, what could be changed, kind of confirming results or game tape for the acre. As you've gotten to know us and the AcreForward technology suite, just what's your reaction? How would you describe it to someone who hasn't seen it? And then what's your reaction to what this does for these relationships?
My reaction is, it's amazing. And, I'm kind of a promoter by nature.
Okay.
But it reminded me of when Precision Ag came along. Because I was like, you got to be kidding me. This is amazing. So think about this for a minute, Mike. Perhaps for the first time in history, a farmer can now see stand count issues or threats, weed, disease, insect, nutrition issues, in time often to do something about it. Rather than waiting till he's in his combine, the yield map shows 200 bushels and all of a sudden it goes down to 120. He goes, well, I wonder what happened there. those days could be over. This is a game changer of enormous potential. I mean, I really believe that. And in fact, when you talked to me 3 or 4 years ago before you joined Taranis, and I made the comment, I said, if it's the fuzzy images, forget it. Because I've had 20 people walk in over the years, more than 20, and they show me a fuzzy satellite map or a fuzzy plane. I'm like, this doesn't help me. But then you said you could read your business card from, 500 feet in the air or whatever. And I'm like, well, that if you could do that, leaf level, that's huge. And so my reaction is it's really, really significant. Doesn't mean everything's perfect. Doesn't mean it's easy, any of that. But the vision and the purpose is solid as a rock, in my opinion.
Well, and I think using that imagery and bringing it together, it's beyond imagery, I think, is what's interesting, because
absolutely,
it's absolutely amazing, because I could take a picture from my phone over the crop, and obviously it's high definition. You see a lot of things. We're offering that at scale on millions of acres. Boom. But we're analyzing it, and we're telling you what's in it. And so as you've looked at this, as you've talked to many, not only retailers, advisors, but just growers in general, and you see what's there, what's powerful about it, but also how do you think it's going to change even the way we're thinking about using it today? I mean, we're just coming out with these things, right? The last 3 years, it's really been commercialized. Yeah, it's on millions of acres. Yes, the best of the crop life 100 have it. But I think we're still just at the beginning of what this data can actually do for a retailer and on the farm. I guess, what are your thoughts about that? Where do you see it going? What's really beneficial, and where do we have more work to do?
Well, I totally agree with that. So it's one thing to get the images. It's one thing to see the reports. It's a whole nother thing to create the action that the grower needs to take. So these growers are busy. So you probably have a certain percentage of them, and I've met some of them. They want to see all the data themselves.
Right.
The majority don't. The majority want to say, let's say I'm a farmer and you're my trusted advisor, Mike. Mike, tell me what I need to do. And that's when that salesperson has preferred position. They're a trusted advisor. And you and I both know a bunch of those. But you got to earn your way there. But it's a matter of taking those insights and doing something with them. It's sort of like market research. If you do customer research or some type of market research, and you get it back and you go, okay, wow, but you don't do anything with it. What good is it? And I've been there before. We've done that before.
Why buy the book if you're not going to read it?
Exactly. And so the ability to take it and transfer it into action, meaningful action. But think about it. This is something that we haven't talked a whole lot about. And that's also in the world of climate change that we hear a lot about and all the
right. things.
You have the opportunity here to minimize environmental impact. And we don't talk about that a whole lot. But if I'm a grower, I have a 100-acre field, for example, and my data shows me that I have weeds in 20% of that field, I may not spray the whole field.
Right.
Think of that.
Or you spray it earlier because and so you use less or you get ahead of it, right?
Exactly.
So you mentioned environmental impact. I like this because you did government and industry relations. So I like this conversation because I think, personally, many farmers, most, really care about their land and their legacy and what they do with it. I also know that the growers and those who serve them are a very small percentage of our population. So when it comes to legislation, when it comes to policy, when it comes to the value chain, folks who live, work, understand agriculture is a very small percentage. And that's no slam on those that don't. But when we have these environmental conversations about who's doing what and stewardship, don't you think we could be better advocates of, hey, we are doing it right and we can show it? Because I think there's a lot more people asking questions than they used to.
There's a lot more people asking questions. That's a great point. And here's an example. So we went up to Capitol Hill, and I was talking to Senator Kane and Warner's office of Virginia and talking with their staffs and explaining to them what we do in the eastern part of Virginia for water quality, promoting buffer strips, using precision agriculture, etc. Well, they still stare at you with about a half a blank stare because they really don't know. And I said, why don't you all come on down and let's go out to King William, Virginia, and let us show you what we do. 3 weeks later, they came down. They crawled all over the big, tractors and Hagees and Big A's, whatever it was. They looked at the maps. They saw the precision ag maps. They saw what we were doing. They couldn't believe it. They could not believe it. They drive back to Washington. What do you think they do? They talk about, what retailers are doing to minimize leaching into the Chesapeake Bay.
Right.
Or to minimize using herbicides. Integrated pest management goes back years and years, and you and I learned that years and years ago. But it basically means, when's it going to cost more to not spray than to spray?
Economic injury thresholds.
That's it. And now with this tool, it makes it even better, easier to explain, easier to use that IPM tool in the field. So, it's, but it also shows we're good stewards, that agriculture is good stewards. And I promote talking to your legislators and talking to folks in Washington because, quite frankly, forget the party. They're both interested in it.
Right. We have to advocate for ourselves, and we have to show, even though the tools are really sophisticated in ag, beyond what Taranis is doing. If you think about just what the average grower, the average crop consultant has to be able to do and deal with in a day, whether it's biology, chemistry, finance, accounting, especially a lot of those marketing programs that are out there and the complexity. A little bit of a joke, but not really. And then you get up, there's a lot of math and science. It's a great field to be in, but it's much more complex than it ever has been. And that's what I like about the AcreForward technology from Taranis, because what we're starting to do, we don't replace the advisor. And I'm sure you hear some concern that, well, this takes away because I do the scouting. But what we look at is, listen, we can't do everything. We can take high-res imagery. We can analyze it down to counting the spots on a ladybug or counting the defoliated area of a leaf and helping you calculate the economic injury threshold. But there's still so many other variables. We see this as a communication piece for you to put your advice, your notes, your actions to work with the grower to create the right plan. And I think that's conceptually an easy thing, but in practice, this is a change, Steve. This is a big, big change because you have to be free enough to use this technology to collaborate with the grower. So I guess, what did you see in that as you traveled the country and you looked at how people are working? What are the pitfalls and what are the opportunities with tech like this?
Well, there's a couple things I noticed. One was there is, fear is a powerful emotion too. There's some fear that you may be trying to replace me as a salesman with technology. And no one is. Not one person said that. But some of the salespeople may sense that. They may feel that. And the second thing was, you're just putting another thing on my plate. I'm already busy. I'm already swamped. You're putting another thing on my plate. Well, what most of the leaders have told me is, we're not trying to replace them at all, but now we know which way to steer the truck in the morning. So you get the insights, and you see a problem in field 23, you know where to go to ground truth it. Now, every one of us watching this that's ever been in sales, we have to admit, we burned up a lot of fuel and chewed up a lot of tires driving out there. You just do. But now you have more reasons to go where you go. Why you go where you go now makes a lot more sense. So it increases the efficiency enormously for a retailer. In fact, several retailers told me that. They said, it's one thing for the grower. It's huge for the grower, but it's also very beneficial for the retailer. But I think I heard you say in one of your podcasts, efficiency is one thing, improving profits is even more important. So it helps that retailer because they can manage their resources better.
Right.
And it helps that grower as well. So multiple benefits to the use of this. But you mentioned something, I said this for years, Mike. You think about agriculture, you've got plant science, weed science, soil science, insect science, economics, finance, accounting, government programs, weather, technology of all types. You've got to be a machine to really understand all this stuff and use it in such a way to help that grower. I mean, it's tough. It's fun and it's exciting. And if you're a person that loves to learn, it's great. But it's not for the faint of heart.
No, and I think the tools don't make some things easier, but it actually requires a higher level of business acumen and professionalism to be able to take all of that information and synthesize it, have it make sense, and really be a partner with the grower, right? Because, they're going to give recommendations, but it's a partnership and it's a conversation because there's an economic decision and there's a real impact of what did I do that worked and what am I doing that I need to do better? And I think that's really, for me, in farming, how many products come out saying they're going to give you 4, 5, 10 bushel?
Yeah.
And do we really know? Or the research, the R&D or the seed guide says this hybrid's going to do X, Y, Z. But is it that case on your farm? And there's plots and there's trials. There's a lot of investment that goes into proving things. But I think we're only at the beginning of knowing what we can know about the intersection of all these variables and our management practices, our behaviors, and what contributes to the success on our acre.
That's a great way to put it because, we're at the intersection of all this stuff, all this information, and the smart ones, they have a way. You use the word synthesize. That's a great to synthesize and turn it into something, a meaningful conversation that you can have with the grower that could benefit them. That's the secret sauce. And not everybody's real good at that. And so that takes work. It takes practice. It's just like anything else. It takes practice. But when you get good at it, you're much more effective in your role. The grower's going to respect you more. The retail, your board's going to respect you more, but it's a challenge, but it's a challenge worth taking.
Yeah. And I think knowledge is power, but sharing it. So I don't know how many times, whether you're selling hybrids or solutions, trying to describe it versus showing it still has a ton of value. And then recording it in a systematic way. You said, hopefully we get ahead of those things that take your combine and your monitor from showing you 220 down to 160. But those things are still going to happen. Do we remember all the decisions and all the factors to understand why that result was what it was? And I know we're there, right? That's why I do this. That's why I'm at Taranis with the AcreForward solution that we have, because I know we're starting to show that. But I think what's important for the audience and for our customers, and you've seen it, is we're just at the beginning of what this can do, but it requires use. It requires that advisor to actually bring their full skill set forward. In fact, sometimes it's a little bit more work and effort because you're changing what you do. You're making a change in how you're going to serve and work with that grower. But doesn't that separate those who are going to win and help support growers versus those that won't? I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Do I have that right? Because I don't think anything of this value comes without some kind of sacrifice.
You're 100% correct. In fact, I talked to a person for an hour and a half this morning, and I start with the overall concept. Does it make sense that this tool is available that can go over the field? And he said, if anybody says it doesn't, they don't know what they're talking about. He says it's incredible. It makes incredible sense. But the key word is engagement. It's engagement. So to be engaged takes energy. It takes enthusiasm. And Mike, there's a lot of information that flows down. Okay. You have to be willing maybe to take an hour a day and study that information. And some people are going to be more comfortable driving around in the truck. Well, guess what? To your point, the world is changing. I mean, it's changing. Drive around in your truck aimlessly, and I'm not saying that I've done it, okay? I've done it. Your hope, in fact, somebody said, yeah, you drive around and you hope you find something.
Right.
Can't do that anymore. And you don't need to do that anymore. But, you know, time is our most limited resource. And if you think, if some of these sales guys took 1 hour a day, just 1 hour, early in the morning, and studied the insights and the actions before they hit the road, before they do the normal stuff, and took some notes, just think about how much more effective that's going to make them. So that's 5 hours of study in a week, actually 7. You can do it on the weekend too. And then times 4 weeks, you know, it's 28 hours of study. Next thing you know, you're getting really good at synthesizing all the information and explaining it. So it takes a little change in what you do every day. But
that sounds pretty scary, right? So I'm gonna move the AcreForward. I've got this solution, but I need an hour a day. But the truth is, opportunity cost is a huge thief. It's a huge thief. And whether it's half hour, actually going through and getting, we give you a bird's eye view, pretty good view over, like if you're one advisor serving, I don't know, 50,000 acres, 60,000 acres, how many growers? 10, 20, 30. You can start your morning going, I know where there's a problem. I know where things are good. And I want to come back to that in a second, but I know where there's issues. Well, yeah, I could drive to each one. I could ground truth them, but I don't really have to ground truth them if it's as if I'm standing over it on my iPad screen or my computer.
Right.
But click of a button, Steve, I can send it to you and say, hey, this is what we need to take care of. This is where we need to go. Or to my operators, let's prioritize these fields before this gets out of hand. So I think it actually adds more time back, but you're right, there's an initial investment. But one thing you said is interesting. We drive around looking for something, how often do we miss or pay attention to what works? Even our technology, we can point out everything that's wrong with an acre, everything, all the holes on a leaf, all the nutrient deficiencies, where plants are missing. But isn't the inverse even more powerful? Being able to show what was done properly?
Well, I mean, that's a good point. And yes, we should focus on that some as well. So if you could show the farmer who was shooting for 33,000 plants per acre that he nailed it,
okay,
is that a benefit? Yes, it absolutely is. Can you show him that his weed control program worked? You know, that he probably doesn't need to change that field. So that's a really good point. You know, we tend to focus on the problems that we could solve for them, but there's also benefit to point out what they're doing right and what they may not need to change.
What I'm wondering if that's really the transformation we're talking about is we know more about the problems than ever, and that's true. But the inverse is really allowing us to understand the things that actually contribute to the outcome, regardless of whether it's good or bad, but it's going to help us understand how we can make decisions to continually improve that outcome. I think we're at the beginning of, remember when outcome-based was in vogue? Everybody wanted to get to outcome-based, to sell, but Steve, to earn the right to do that, you have to record and understand what's happening in these intersections. I think we're just at the very beginning of being able to understand the actions I take, the response from that crop, the solutions I'm deploying, and how they actually contribute to the outcome at the end of the year. I think that's the technology revolution that we're on the cusp of, now that we can get up over all these acres economically and see what's going on.
Yeah. Now that makes a lot of sense. And you're really talking about, you know, that whole farm plan discussion.
Okay.
So you sit down with that grower and let's evaluate your herbicide program. Let's evaluate, you know, your yields this year. Let's evaluate your soil testing. What went right? What went wrong? And, you know, now we have all these tools, these additional tools. How do they integrate into the whole farm plan? And that's why a lot of times when I talk about Taranis, I say it's another tool in your toolbox. And that doesn't minimize it. It's another picture a sales guy going out there and around his belt, he's got a tool belt full of tools. Well, you know, you got a precision ag tool, you got your soil testing tool, you got your tissue testing tool, You have your knowledge tools. And next thing you know, now you have this tool, which brings a different benefit or a better benefit than walking the field and not doing a very good job at it, because nobody does a very good job at walking fields because it's difficult. It's inefficient as all get out. So, it's another tool in the toolbox to contribute to that whole farm plan discussion. It's kind of the way I think about it.
No, it's a great way to think about it. And I really think we are on the beginning of something special, working with the retailers and growers. And really, the company's been around since 15, but the last 3 years, the intersection of the energy capabilities of batteries, the optics of drones, the integrations, the supply of people that are out there making a living flying drones of all types in all industries.
Oh, yeah.
We're at the convergence of a very unique time. And it's the first time in the history of mankind that we could even do what we're talking about today. And that is get a bird's eye view, surveil the acres, understand what's happening, turn it around, analyze billions of pixels, trillions of pixels, and take it into usable information so an advisor can make a better decision. And that's really powerful. So Steve, anything else that, as you've been kind of looking at Taranis, looking at what's going on, working with the growers, all the history you have, what's like the biggest aha or highlight for you? Just, you may have already said it in this conversation, but why is this important and what stands out?
I think the biggest thing is, and you alluded to it just now, it's one thing to have a vision. It's another thing to manifest it in the real world.
Okay.
And so I think Taranis has had the vision for 8 years or whatever it was, Now it's manifesting in the real world, along with all the issues that come with that. People issues, improvement issues. If you think about software, why are there updates to the phone all the time? There's always updates because they always need improving. The software, the reports are always going to need to be improved. The imagery needs to be improved. The ability to have a drop-down menu that says this stand count reduction usually results in $60 an acre yield loss. Think about the power of that. If you had that, or this weed over threshold level generally leads to a 30 bushel per acre loss times $6 a bushel or 14 if it's soybeans, whatever. So there's always enhancements you can make. But the manifestation of the vision, to me, is starting to happen. It's you got people issues to work through. You've got belief systems. You've got labor issues. You get, for example, one account, one guy's gung-ho. Well, he left to go to another company. So that's
right. It's normal. Yep.
It's normal stuff. I mean, it's human stuff. So, but that vision is there. And the mission of helping retailers improve their profitability by giving them a differentiating tool that helps that grower improve their profitability, solid as a rock. You just got to keep pushing. You got to keep on. I told you about the movie Air. I don't know if you've seen.
I've seen it. It's a great movie.
Matt Damon in that movie, that vision was so strong that he had to push through all those issues fighting against him. But look what happened. It was huge. So I think about that analogy with Taranis. The manifestation is starting to happen. We got to keep pushing through all these other things to really hit that boom.
And that boom is for everyone. So, when we're talking and our audience is hearing this, the cooperatives and retailers that are part of this are part of that vision, are part of driving that forward. And we're working together because you want to be welcomed at the farm gate. Well, this is a ticket to have that conversation anytime. You want to manage your team for the ultimate in performance. You talk about exciting teams, being a promoter, having passion. Why don't we invest in that relationship between the advisors that you have and the growers and create that passion? And that's what this knowledge is going to do. That's what these tools do, is let's invest in these relationships, because Steve, I believe, and I know you believe, that growers not only they deserve this type of relationship with their advisor, with this kind of knowledge and these kinds of details, so we can improve this, so we can tell our story, so we can create a vibrant agricultural economy and keep growing it. So with that, I want to thank Steve for joining us here today on the AcreForward podcast. Here at Taranis, when we say AcreForward, we're talking about a passion. Steve, you talked about this, a passion to drive more value from each and every acre. So if you have an AcreForward mindset and you'd like to hear more conversations with interesting people like Steve across the agricultural industry, please check out our episodes and subscribe to the AcreForward podcast at acreforwardpodcast.com.